The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to explore and explain key features of texts and how they contribute to meaning. Learners should be able to identify and explain the purpose, structure, and language use in texts. Learners should be able to recognize the writer's and/or the character's viewpoint and give supporting evidence from the texts.
Hi, I'm Megan. In our previous lesson on evaluating and comparing texts, we learnt the definitions of these words: style, tone, diction, and register. And we then used these terms to analyze an article. We are going to take these terms and we're going to apply them to 3 different texts that were all written about the same event. This will enable us to compare these articles, the purpose for which they were written, and how they were written. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to analyze texts according to their purpose, attitude, and style, and compare texts about the same incident. This is a credit card driver's license. People had over 5 years to convert the license in their ID book to one of these. Many people didn't convert their license in time, and when they realized that the deadline was about to expire, they raced to the traffic department. This resulted in long queues and delays, and many people grew very frustrated. This event was widely covered in the press, and we're going to look at some examples of the texts that were produced at this time. Let's begin with the first one. This article is called Going to the Gallows by Lynn Sampson. It is taken from the Sunday Times lifestyle section. Before we look at the text, you need to understand the context in which it appears. The lifestyle section is for fun reading. It's informal, it's light-hearted. It includes articles on travel, food and wine, and entertainment. Now that you know this, do you think the article is likely to be factual or just for fun? Do you think the tone is likely to be light-hearted or serious? Once you've made your predictions, let's look at the first paragraph and see if you're correct. Getting the new driving license put most people in a rage. I was probably the only one in the queue who had already got a license and was there for the fun, which is an indication of how meager my social life is. Now, whether or not this is true, I can't tell you. I think it would be highly unlikely that someone would put themselves through waiting in a queue just to boost their social life. But think about where this article appeared. It's not designed to be factual. It was written just for fun. We can see this when we carry on reading and see Lynn Sampson's description of what it was like in the queue. It's a party. There are candles and a girl strums a guitar. A man with a cashmere jersey tied round his neck, who looks like Jude Law, lies back in a deck chair sipping something bubbly. A young woman with a sulky silhouette leans against the wall. A man in a flat jacket types away on a laptop. The style and content that Lynn Sampson has used here is similar to that used by gossip columnists. By mentioning the candles and the guitar, it almost sounds as if the queues were a pleasant place to be, and if you came prepared, you could even have a glass of something bubbly. Why do you think Sampson has described the queuing process like this, especially when it was something that most people found very frustrating? I think perhaps she's used the same style as a gossip columnist would, to show people that they can lighten up, and instead of complaining, they should rather see the queuing as a social event. The article continues like this. The place is an emporium of anecdote. There are the serial queuers. I've been here since 5. I'll probably get it at about midday tomorrow. One woman is selling a place up front, 700 Rand. A group of youthful entrepreneurs are standing in the queue and then selling their places, 100 Rand, cheap at the price. Just like before, Lynn Sampson continues to use the same style as a gossip columnist would use. She also focuses on events that her readers might find entertaining, such as various schemes to sell places at the front of the queue. She's also made some interesting choices of diction. Let's have a look at these. She describes an emporium of anecdote. What exactly is an emporium? An emporium is a giant market. An anecdote is a description of something that has happened to you, often an amusing little story. So by describing the queue as an emporium of anecdote, she is making out as if the people are quite happy to share their little stories of what they have gone through in order to get their licenses. Here's another interesting choice of words, serial queuers. Lynn Sampson has made up this word, queuers, to describe the people who are standing in the queues. Also, it's interesting that she calls them serial queuers. Somebody who does something in serial does it over and over again, but normally this word has negative connotations. I'm sure you've heard the term serial murderers before. That's how the term is usually used. So what have people been telling these anecdotes or stories about? Well, Lynn Sampson describes them as telling stories about buying places at the front of the queue or standing in queues for hours only to have the door closed in their face. These events were reported elsewhere in the press, but slightly differently. Elsewhere in the press, they'd be described as bureaucratic bungling or corruption amongst the public. Yet here, she is making out as if they are war stories, stories that you'd exaggerate when you tell your friends to make the situation seem even worse than it was, or else as bits of social gossip. Let's read the next bit to see how else she describes the events. Some people say they will definitely extend the hours. Some people say they won't. A book is opened, odds 10 to 1 against. These odds mean that for every 1 Rand people bet, they would get 10 Rand if the licensing department chose to extend the hours. It's also interesting to see that she's discussing the controversy surrounding whether or not the hours would in fact be extended. This exact same issue was being debated elsewhere in the press, but far more seriously. Now let's take another look at a text that was also produced at this time. It's a cartoon by Zapiro. This Zapiro cartoon appeared in the editorial section of the Sunday Times at the time of the licensing panic. Remember that a cartoon is also a form of text. It conveys a message through pictures and words. However, in the case of political cartoons, often the message is satirical. What does satire mean? Satire uses humor to convey a serious message or to make a point. Look at this cartoon and see if you can work out what serious point is being made. In this cartoon, you see people racing for the door. 2 policemen, who look as if they are clearly out of their depth, are attempting to hold them back. The lady looks like she's just asked the man a question. He replies, "No, I'm not a department official. I'm recruiting for the Super 12. Now, to completely catch the humor of this cartoon, you need to understand what the Super 12 is. The Super 12 is an international rugby tournament. What would a recruiter be doing recruiting rugby players in the queue for a traffic license? What do these members of the public and rugby players have in common? They both charge towards their goal, even if it means knocking people who get in their way off their feet. This man even looks as if he is about to score the winning touchdown." Zapiro's cartoon is both witty and satirical. In it, he is making the point that people who are normally very polite start pushing and shoving like rugby players as they get increasingly more desperate. Both of the texts that we have looked at so far are quite humorous. Yet there were many other articles in the paper that dealt with this issue in a far more serious light. Let's take a look at one of the examples of this. The title of this article is "Over 1 million don't have new licenses." Unlike the other texts that we have looked at in this lesson, this article does not give people's opinions. Instead, it gives the facts of the issue. Also, it was not written in a light-hearted style because it was not meant to entertain, rather it was meant to inform people. As we look at a paragraph from it, pay attention to the diction and style that have been used and how these differ from the Lynn Sampson article that we looked at earlier. Over 1 million don't have new licenses. The tone of this article is unemotional. It is neutral. It simply presents the facts of the case without the author's opinion getting involved. Also, the Transport Department spokesperson is quoted. Again, she doesn't defend her department's position. She simply states how many people still have to convert. So as you can see, the three texts that we have looked at today use very different tones and styles because the author's attitude is different in each case. Let's summarize what we have learned. We looked at three articles, one by Lynn Sampson taken from the lifestyle section, a Zapiro cartoon, and a news article. The intention of the lifestyle cartoon was to describe and entertain. Lynn Sampson's attitude was relaxed. Her tone was amused. She did not take this event seriously. The register that she used was informal. Zapiro's intention was to comment on the event and also to amuse us. His attitude was amused. He also didn't take the event seriously, and he has used a light-hearted tone. Just like the Sampson article, he has used an informal register. The intention of the news article is to inform readers. Unlike the other two, it was not designed to entertain. The attitude of the journalist is neutral. The tone is informative. And finally, the register is more formal than that of the other two. Pay attention to the words I've used. You will use these when analyzing and comparing texts in tests and exams. I hope that you are starting to see that different texts can approach the same topic in different ways depending on what their purpose is. I also hope you are starting to see how you can use the terminology that we are learning and apply it to texts that you encounter. It's now time to write a text of your own. As you complete this task, pay attention that you use the appropriate tone, style, and diction. On one hand, you want to be respectful, but you also want to state your opinions carefully. Pay attention to these features also when you examine any text, and soon you will be a star at applying what you have learnt to any text that you encounter. Please join me for the next lesson in this series on evaluating and comparing texts. Goodbye.